You probably didn't know that we are living through an extremely unusual period of biomedical innovation right now. A number of diseases that are either debilitating or fatal that were previously untreatable are now not only being treated, but in many cases being cured. Yeah, cured. And one of the best examples is the progress that's being made in the area of rare diseases. According to the 1983 Orphan Drug Act, in the United States, a rare disease is considered any disease that has 200,000 patients or less. And so here's some examples. LCA, Leber's congenital amaurosis, a hereditary form of blindness. Or SMA, spinal muscular atrophy, a neurodegenerative disorder that causes difficulty in breathing, eating, moving, and in some cases is fatal. Leukemia, hemophilia, sickle cell. Each one of these diseases has now developed new treatments that can actually cure them, literally erasing the disease from this planet. And there are over 200 gene therapies in late-stage clinical trials that are doing the same thing. And what's a gene therapy? It's a treatment that fixes genetic typos in your DNA by taking the correct version of the gene, putting it into a virus, injecting the virus into the patient, and then the virus swaps out the defective gene for the correct version, and presto, you are cured. So stay tuned in the next coming few months and years for a number of healthcare breakthroughs for macular degeneration, heart disease, diabetes, and so on. This is a far cry from where we were a few years ago, where if you had a rare condition that doctors didn't understand and didn't know how to treat, you were pretty much out of luck. But thanks to the so-called omics revolution, progress in genomics, epigenomics, transcriptomics, proteomics, all of these different fields, we can now take the patient population and stratify them into subpopulations based upon their genetic sequences and treat the diseases at their root. This has ushered in a new age of divide and conquer, the age of genomic medicines. That's the good news. The not so good news is there is one omics that has been a bottleneck to progress, and that is economics, because we got to pay for all this stuff, and the business models can be quite challenging. So let me talk a bit about the economics. First of all, there are about 12,000 rare diseases that we know of, affecting over 30 million Americans. Not so rare in the aggregate. And they're often due to single gene mutations, which, because of the gene therapy and gene editing tools that scientists have developed, we can actually do something about. Due to the smaller patient population of rare diseases, the urgent need, the higher prices you can charge, the lower development costs, higher success rates, and all of these factors, we can actually create economic models that can generate many therapies, cures, while at the same time giving investors a decent rate of return. So you don't need billions of dollars, but even a few hundred million and 10 or 20 rare disease development programs are enough to create a number of new therapies. Now, part of the reason for that is one very important financial property, and that is lack of correlation. When you have a collection of these rare disease therapeutics that are so different from each other, the success or failure of one program has virtually nothing to do with the success or failure of a different one. And as a result, when you put together a portfolio of uncorrelated financial assets, the risk is reduced at the rate of the square root of the number of projects. And that means that for a large enough portfolio, investors are going to be very keen to put money to work. So I'm going to give you an example in an area that I'm working on right now, which is how to finance ultra-rare disease therapeutics. These are diseases that have so few people around the world that suffer from them that there's virtually no incentive for biotech and pharma to go after them because you can't make money even after you get a drug approved. Now, it turns out that there's a government program called the PRV. PRV stands for Priority Review Voucher. And this is a government program that awards a piece of paper to drug companies that develop a therapy for one of these rare diseases. What does this piece of paper do? Well, it gives the holder the right to go to the FDA and ask them to review another drug within a 6-month time span for approval. 6 months, what's the big deal? Well, right now it takes about 9 to 12 months to get the FDA to do a review. So if you can save 3 to 6 months, that means that you have that much longer to sell an approved drug. And on the open market today, a single PRV, which has no expiration date and is transferable, so you can sell it to any party you wish, is currently selling for about $100 million. So even if you develop a therapy for a rare disease that will never make any money, a single PRV gives you a $100 million payday. And the question is, can we generate attractive rates of return for investors if we only focused on PRVs? If we put together a portfolio of drug development programs that will never generate any revenues after approval other than the PRV? Well, let's do the math. If we have N programs, each costing C dollars to run the clinical trials all the way to approval, the total cost is N times C. The expected value of the revenues from this program, assuming that we never make a single dollar from selling the approved drug, the only revenue comes from the PRV, that's going to be equal to the cost of the PRV multiplied by the number of successful drugs, which is N times the probability of success per trial, P. And when we subtract one equation from the other, we get the expected profit. And when we divide by the particular cost of creating this portfolio, N times C, we get the rate of return. And if it takes Y years to do the drug development, then the annual expected rate of return is given by this equation. Now, it turns out that this expression is one of the most beautiful equations in all of healthcare finance. Now, I know it sounds a bit nerdy, busted, guilty. But by the way, what do you call a nerd in 10 years? Boss. Thank you. So this expression says that investors will earn a positive return as long as that first term is greater than 1. And that's equivalent to as long as P is greater than C over PRV. In this one expression contains all of the elements of drug development, the science, the medicine, the economics. Because P, the probability of success, there's your science and medicine. And the right-hand side, the cost of clinical trials divided by the value of a PRV, that's the economics. And let me show you the numbers. Every row here corresponds to a different assumed value for the cost of developing a drug, from 5 million all the way to 50 million. Now, I know these numbers seem kind of low, especially for those who have heard that it takes $2 to $3 billion to develop a successful drug. Remember, we're focusing on ultra-rare diseases, so small patient population and a much lower cost of running the clinical trials. Every column corresponds to a different assumption for the probability of success, going from 5% all the way up to 50%. And so let's do an example. Suppose it takes $10 million to develop a single ultra-rare disease drug. And let's suppose the probability of success is, 25%. According to this table, the expected annual return of investors that put money into this fund is 20%. 20% annual expected rate of return. That's higher than most hedge funds in the entire financial industry. We can do that all day long with private sector money. If it cost $50 million to develop a single drug in this case, now the expected annual return is minus 13%. No investor will put money to work on those terms. So this table actually tells us what kinds of diseases can be treated using this portfolio model and what can't and requires government and philanthropic funding. And more importantly, this table allows biomedical experts and financial engineers to collaborate on figuring out the best way to create these drug development programs. For example, if we can save on the cost of clinical trials, we move up in the table. And if the science and engineering improves, we go to the right. And that gives us much more attractive terms by which we can develop these therapeutics, bringing more cures to patients faster. These business models and a number of their fancier versions using machine learning to predict clinical trial outcomes and more Monte Carlo simulations to develop more sophisticated business models are allowing us to develop better treatments for patients faster and ultimately cheaper. So let me wrap up by pointing out that finance does not have to be a zero-sum game if we don't let it. With the right business model, the right kind of financing, at the right scale, we can do the thing that all of us say we want to do, and very few of us are ever privileged to do, which is to be able to do well by doing good. Thank you.